What's happening?
Hey, Karel.
That was really fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into some of these questions. I feel like a lot of them are similar in nature, and I can really relate to this because, having worked with musicians over the year, it always impresses me. We sit down and the musicians are just going off and talking about musical theory and, oh, we're going to do this,
Right.
all this chords and here, and then we'll go here. And I always felt like, oh man, this is so embarrassing. I don't know what
Right.
they're talking about. And you do, the more you learn, the easier it gets, but we have to realize, musicians often feel the same. Maybe you can, this is kind of our intro to our Q&A, but maybe you can relate to this, and that because I know you were a musician before you became a singer. Like singers and musicians don't have anything in common, but but just the same thing for musicians. If singers start talking about all this technical stuff about singing, I'm sure the musicians feel a little bit lost as well. What
Right.
what, what do you have to say about that?
That's a good question. Well, honestly, I don't know if that would happen as much because usually it's not a room full of singers with a minority musicians. Usually there's a backing band with one singer. So, and as you know, not as many singers are as technically proficient in the vocabulary of their voice.
Yeah,
So,
there's a huge range, and you
yeah,
described that in the live stream as well. You've got some really famous singers um, that are musically, so to speak, illiterate, but they're still making brilliant music.
yeah, absolutely.
The process is quite different and sometimes more tedious.
Yeah. So I've never been usually, you know what, that might happen in a band. Like, say you were in a group of really trained vocalists, like pentatonics or something. So maybe their rehearsal pianist might feel a little bit at odds when they're talking about how to shape vowels or this or that, assuming that's their process. But even that, they wouldn't have a slack rehearsal pianist. So it's probably a little bit more one sided than we'd like to think. It's usually the singer who isn't using the same vocabulary as the band versus the other way around.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think I'll just take this opportunity to tell everybody, this is a very, very valuable skill, and it really helps you communicate with your band, with your musicians, whether it's your steady band where communication is going to be much better anyway over time, or if you're gigging with different musicians and you got to put things together, and somebody's new's coming in, you want them to sing harmonies and riff here and do this. I mean, it just speeds up the process immensely, and I think the band feels so much more comfortable with you as a singer.
Yeah. Here's an analogy where it would go the way you were saying. If the singer is dictating to the band, "Hey, you sing this harmony, you sing," that's how it would be. It might not be talking about the voice, but I have a friend who's a phenomenal bass player. You look at his resume, it's the top household names, right? When he sings, he gets real timid, you know? So that would be, and maybe this is what you meant and I misread it, but I thought I was thinking more along the lines of talking about the voice and the vocabulary. I wouldn't see that as much, but I would see where the singer, this is a pop star, "Hey, can you sing harmonies of this?" And they're like, "Uh-oh." That's where it is. So it's not so much in the vocabulary that I've seen it, but in the actual act of singing. And that's why everyone's got to sing. That's like your main double. Well, I play upright bass too. That's cool. If and when we need that for the unplugged thing. But I'm a great singer. You're hired. Um, so that's more how I would see the flip flop. Like every instrumentalist should be a very not just competent but a strong singer. It's imperative, frankly. So when the singer says, "Can you just sing the harmonies from the record?" and the guys are like, "Oh, geez, Corel," I'll say, "Okay, I'll take the first one." So that's where I see the 2A street. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great that you have that experience and express that to me when we were talking about it. Just it and it's so nice, and I mean everybody is expected to do so many things today. I think people get overwhelmed. Musicians get overwhelmed, they have to sing, or maybe some singers get overwhelmed with having to know more music vocabulary and being able to communicate better with the band. But I just want to comfort people and say this isn't, it shouldn't be overwhelming. You don't need to become an expert. You just need some basic learning. A little bit adds up over time. So don't feel pressure that you have to go out and study like crazy for the next 6 months. If you just apply 15 minutes a day, if for the next 6 months, oh my gosh, you do that consistently, you will transform your ability level to communicate and also what you want to perform.
That's all you need.
Yeah,
Phone, piano,
yeah. My daughter's 4 now. This is funny. People are going to hear this, but yesterday we just had that conversation. I mean, we have so many tools today that just did not exist before. I mean, we have a piano in our phone. My daughter can't imagine not having YouTube or internet or Netflix or a phone or, most of her learnings online. She's like, what? You didn't have this?
People took their families on road trips before iPads were invented.
Yeah, now we just sit in the living room and go on a virtual road trip. All
Yeah.
right, let's dig into our into our questions here. I'm gonna pop this up. What's the best way to practice singing harmonies? Oh, I really need to work on that as a singer. Actually, we already answered that one. Let's open it up. We're gonna do some live Q&A. Okay. We have a question from Andrea Bello. And the question is, Korel, for us, is that also a good method for adult learning or improving piano? Any programs or app recommendations? Thanks. So I don't know if I'm getting the exact context. Is this a good method? Can you apply this to your instrument learning intervals for adults as well? And do you have any other apps that you've ever used or would recommend?
So yeah, I listened to your question. I didn't. Oh, for adults who absolutely. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to say. This, granted, we're talking about one small piece of music. We're talking about intervals only, right? However, like I tried to implore, this is a more bass function than any instrument, right? The notes are frequencies. It could be a guitar, a trombone, a voice. It does a piano. It whatever instrument is putting out the frequencies, and it doesn't have to be one instrument. This is how you analyze a string section and write it out. If someone plays a C in the bass, and the viola plays above them, it's two different instruments, but I'm hearing well, I can't sing that low. Let's take it up where I gotta sing. You have two instruments playing this, and they're sitting on the opposite sides of the room. That's irrelevant. The sound is in the air. We're listening, we're measuring the distance of what our ears are hearing. So I hear root, and I hear to myself, root up an octave. Oh, blah, dee, oh, blah, blah, oh, okay, it's a major third of the chord up an octave, which is also called a tenth, but that's for another discussion. That's almost irrelevant because as long as you can hear the bass 12, you're good. So yes, it's for your piano, it's for your guitar, it's for your voice. It's this. It doesn't have to go any further than your mind. Everything else is pushing buttons. But if you have this stuff internalized, and that's why I'm so passionate about this, because again, it's about freedom. I don't care what instrument you're playing, but if you have your intervals and all this stuff internalized, then it's a matter of what button do I need to push on what to get there. I can drive a little electric Prius. I can drive a dump truck. I can drive a backhoe. The backhoe has different knobs to press, but as long as I know this is forward, this is back, this is side, this is fast, then it's a matter of what buttons to press to get the distance you want to get. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think that was very helpful, and I love the way what you continue to repeat. Our mind is already processing this. That's, I think, what a lot of people neglect to recognize. Your mind already has been processing this for as long as you've been alive, very accurately. If you have a normal speech melody in whatever language you speak, you have excellent ears and actually excellent intonation.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is just a coordination and putting it in a certain context. The next question from Alvaro. Can you see that as well, Korel? I find it more difficult to identify intervals in a lower range than in a higher range. Is this common? Does it have to do with the distance in hertz between the notes of the interval? For example, between C2 and D2, the distance is shorter than between C3 and D3. Thank you. Any thoughts on that?
Well, interesting. In a yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking of it. I've never thought of it quite that way, um, but I do know what you mean. It's a very intellectual take on the frequency stuff down there. Um, it could be. I've never heard anyone ask that specific question, um, but either way, it's a matter of as simple. I hate to. I am not copping out as I say this. Just spend more time practicing in the lower range because even those low notes aren't that far out of our at the edge of our hearing spectrum. You know, you can it's totally doable. Um, this is so there is some training involved possibly. Here's an interesting analogy. This saxophone is a soprano saxophone, right? And this one is like one of the 100-year-old 1920s ones, right? So nowadays when they make a saxophone, the harmonics come out of where the harmonics, actually the tone comes out here, but as soon as you lift a key, that's where their harmonic is split, and that's how they decide what pitch is being played. And on the old horns, those key holes, those tone holes, are placed by probably some mold they had, but not scientifically. On the new horns, it's all they measure their frequencies of the instrument. They place that stuff accurately. Hence, on both of all my saxophones are old. When I play in a higher register, the tone holes aren't precise enough that if I don't adjust, I'm going to be playing sharp up high. If I keep the same embouchure, and I can show you, except it'd be ugly and embarrassing. So trust me, I can make a saxophone sound bad. But the thing is, if I'm playing in tune in the middle register, and if I go up, the instrument, this isn't an exact answer to your question, but it's showing that what you're asking takes place in all sorts of different, there's just too much chaos out there, you know? We're always making adjustments. So I have to, when I'm playing a horn, loosen up when I play high so that I'm underblowing what would otherwise be an accurately played note so that it's actually in tune. So you're having a situation where you're having a little more challenge on low registers making that identification. So I hate to sound like a dodge, but I feel like you just maybe just need to spend more time specifically drilling your low registers. And I think I'd love to think that it would just clear itself up. I know what you're saying about the distance between the hertz and everything. Having never read a specific book that addresses that question specifically, that would be my answer. Is that helpful? Hopefully.
Yeah, I think it was helpful. I love that example. I wasn't aware, I mean, it's totally logical, but it's so fascinating how instruments were built and also how orchestras were tuned and all these things. I think I just would add something that I really believe is a fact. I can't prove it with everybody, but your ears and your brain is simultaneously processing so many frequencies of sound. Your brain's getting it, your ear is getting it, it's already there. It's just making the subconscious become a conscious activity. And the only way we can really do that is, as Korel said, specifically train that area. It makes sense. It makes sense to me. The question makes sense. Go ahead, Korel.
Oh, I was going to say, but and the converse to this whole thing is true. Um, if I didn't know, or if I'm not on my game, and if I play a saxophone and I don't adjust, I'll be out of tune. But also over years, I would start to think that's what pitch was up there. So if you're playing a piano at home and the piano is chronically out of tune, it might not be a big deal in the long run, but there's a chance that you're going to start singing a little bit more out of tune because you're being reinforced, not that. You're going to hear that, and your brain is going to take the world around it as evidence. So that's just another little addendum to what you just said.
Yeah, that's so true. I mentioned that last week. Remember, singing is a habitual action. So it's another example of what becomes a habit to you becomes your reality. And if you want to improve, you got to change that habitual action. Another question from Rana Ibrahimi. What's the best way to practice singing harmonies? I really need to work on that as a singer. Do you have a suggestion for Rana?
Yeah, well, there's not one way that I've found that works. So I think it's a matter of doing it and doing it and doing it. Um, I think you really need to come at it from all angles with repetition. So I think you should, if it's harmonies that are already established, like say I'm learning a Beatles song or something. Did I mention I like the Beatles? I don't know if you check them out; they're pretty cool. If I was learning a Beatles song, then I would want to learn it on the piano, and I would want to see on the physical keys what each singer is doing, and oh, cool. Um, I've had several ones that are coming to me, people that I've helped with this, and one guy, it was a very talented guy. He's super smart. He's this young kid. He's a self-starter. He's got like inventions and patents, and but he's really a rock star, like hip hop star kind of guy. But he's the real deal. He's awesome, right? He would sing, and his tuning, his intonation is great. But as soon as I sing a harmony with him, he drifts. And I know you've seen this really with people. There's no way you haven't, right? If he's singing, life is very short, and is no time. Perfectly. As soon as I came in, he goes, life is very thrown off track. And there's nothing wrong with the person. Super smart, super talented, super insightful, hard worker. It's a matter of repetition. So we would sit here, and I would play the guitar, and we would do 2-hour sessions working on singing harmonies. And we would pick a song, and I would sing it in unison with him maybe 20 times. And then I would come and sing the harmony with him quietly. When you're singing harmonies, you have to have this dual-edged thing where, and I've never heard anyone talk about this, but I know this is how it is. But maybe we should establish this as a method or something. I don't know. But you have to have your radar out there, but you have to be self-centered and focused and like a freight train on what your part is, right? So you need to know what everyone is doing, because what if someone changes their stuff and they're the lead singer of the band, and your job is to harmonize with them? Well, how often does a lead singer stay on the freaking train? Like, ever, right? And it's not only this, and we're going off track here, but pitch, but also starting and stopping when they stop. If you're singing harmonies with someone, nothing says sloppy college rock bar band like everyone saying their vowels pronounced differently and ending at different times. Anyone can start the same word. It's like, I love you. Like, I love you. Well, what if the bass player, even though they're usually great harmony singers, goes, I love instead of love? You're singing, I love, and they're singing, I love. Well, that doesn't work in a pro sense, because you want to match your tonalities. You're not going to have. I love this analogy too. It's so funny because like Philippe and all of our friends, like it's like voice. And I see Vanessa is out there too. Like, it's like, okay, let's learn the mechanics and the way the performance and all this stuff. But it's all about analogies, and that's the funny thing with voice coaching. I don't love coaching from an analogy standpoint. Like, I don't want to sing through the mask or have a beam of light through your forehead. I want to know that, okay, well, we need to flip our TACT interaction, right? But I speak in analogies, so it's a fun blend. So I communicate what I'm trying to say, and I can't help it. But like, if you're singing differently than the people around you in a harmony sense, it's like having a room that is decorated in rust tones, and it's brown and gold and maroon, and you have one hot pink windowsill, and that just does not work. So people singing harmonies need to pronounce their words in the same way, but often overlooked, and I know this wasn't the question, but it bears saying, ending at the same time. I love you. And one person's going, I love you. Well, no. I love you. No. Stop at the same time also. Pronounce your words the same way. Now, when it comes to practicing them, you need to identify your harmonies. Whether you're the harmony singer or the lead singer, you should both be able to do both, by the way. Any competent harmony singer should be able to jump on the lead as soon as the vocalist mic goes out, if you need to. Any complete vocalist should know what the harmony singers around them are singing. So it's a matter of, it's just do the work. So when you're learning harmonies, to practice them, if it's a matter of not knowing what they are, then sit at a piano, sit at a guitar, and just play out what you want until it sounds right. And if you hear it in your head and you can't play it, then learn your intervals, and soon you will be able to play it. You'll be able to identify what it is, right? Okay. So, and like if I was singing, I love you, it's not always diatonic. That sounds very blocky, but the other person might sing, I love you. Well, you're singing in octaves. That person stays there, and now you're in a fourth, and then love you comes down to minor third. This person comes down to the fifth, down to fourth, love you. So I've had all these relationships in a very simple harmony. It's not supposed to be complicated. I'm not trying to make it complicated, but if I had this, I might sing, I love you, I love you. Okay, now it's all about putting the time in. There's no real shortcuts, is the truth. Sometimes things come naturally to some people and easier, and that's great, and harder to some people. But we all have some area that comes hard to us, and we all have some area that comes easy to us. So as more honestly as you can identify those, you're on the right track. So again, hopefully I'm answering the question. If you're having trouble learning harmonies, sit with an instrument, work it out, identify the intervals, sing it, put the time in, put the time in. If you're having trouble singing the harmonies or singing with a harmony singer, you just gotta work on being aware, but being bullheaded and not being thrown off track. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great answers. So it's a little bit difficult because what is the best way to practice singing harmonies? What is the best way to practice anything is highly individual as well. I mean, the truth is, like Korel said, you have to put in the time to develop it. So there are different approaches, and one easy thing to do is, if you can play the piano a little bit, is just get a track, you can sing the melody, for example, yourself, record it, play it back, and just practice singing the harmony along with that. So if you have like your bass melody that you can repeat on a recording, then you can practice singing harmonies to that. And if, get together with some friends, have some fun with it. And that's just one suggestion, but there are several practice techniques. In the end, it's just putting in the time, and it will get better fast. It's just putting in the time. Next question is, do you recommend any ear training apps? The under 18 crowd loves apps.
Yeah. So I've seen a few and I've seen some, and I think my answer to that is, you want to conquer this mountain. You want to conquer this beast with a death by 1,000 cuts. So I haven't seen any apps that I particularly love, except our friend Dave Stroud has his his Sing Pro app, which is a high dollar app. But he's one of the few apps I've seen where his ear training section is more intuitive and comprehensive. It'll let you pick you can shorten your range. I only want to do these first 3 intervals, and it'll keep you to that and not expand it. And it has a sing function and a recognition function. So I like his, although it's a pricey dollar one. But to me, what we just showed, the piano on your iPhone, that's the app I would use. Apps have been around for how long would you say? 15, 20 years, maybe 20 years, 15 years. And intervals and musical geniuses have been around for 1,000. So I would say that apps are great, but I wouldn't look there for the first. I would look at that as an enhancement. If you found one you worked with, cool. I do know that different people teach ear training differently. There's a guy who's a YouTube sort of educator, really well known. He's more of like a gear producer type of YouTube star. And I have friends that I've worked on tours where he's produced the records. Like I know a little bit about him. He's a thorough and talented musician. I watched one of his ear training videos this is a couple years ago, oh, I wonder how he teaches it, because he had one on ear training. And I was like, this guy's legit. I'm not taking anything away from him. And he's a household name in the YouTube music world, but I'm like, I would never, like, he's already starting, like, he's starting with intervals like perfect fourth and perfect fifth, but then he's explaining it in ways if you already know what he's talking about. To me, you just got to find the person who speaks to you and go that way, because the information is there. It supersedes any one teacher, it supersedes any one person. I like to start with half steps first, because why not take one step as opposed to learning? Some people like to teach a fifth. Oh, it's your power chord. It's this. I'm like, cool, but why jump over?
Yeah.
Let's just. I like to start in half steps and work outwards. So so your core strength is always reinforced. So I personally think the only app you need is the piano on your phone. Personally,
Yeah, I think that's a great clarification. Because like you said at the beginning, a death by a thousand cuts. Okay, this is just repetition. How 90, no, it's 40 to in between 40 and 90% of everything we do on a daily basis is 100% habitual. So you're singing, whatever your level of singing is right now, you have to accept the fact that it's habit. How you sing now is your singing habit. How you hear is your hearing habit. How your ability with intervals and ear training and pitch accuracy is your habit, your current habit. And my message to people is you can learn better habits all the time. So if you just have that little piano app and you work with some of these great suggestions that you gave in the live stream presentation today, and build it one step at a time, really making sure you know. I mean, half step sounds so easy, and who's going to spend 9 weeks working on their half steps? Well, not very many people, but who's going to spend 9 weeks working on their perfect fifth, or, same amount of people? Not very many. So the message is if you just spend a little bit of time on a regular basis, you'll have it, it'll be done, and then you can move on. But I think that's a great, there are some excellent apps, and I do like what's called iSing Pro.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, Sing Pro is Dave's. Yeah.
It's one of the apps I recommend on my site. Um, but like I said, that might be a little bit more advanced than most people need with its functions. It's excellent, and but you can start where you're at. Don't get overwhelmed, and think you need to go out and upgrade all of your systems and what you're doing. Start where you're at and upgrade from there. Let's take the next question here. Okay. Yeah, we kind of answered this one in a live session, but sometimes when I am singing harmony to a song, it's hit and miss. Sometimes I nail it, and sometimes I just can't find which interval I should be singing. How can I overcome? I believe I'll go first this time, but I believe really if you're already, let's just say your current habit, I'm going to keep using this, your current habit is a 75% success ratio. That's great. Fantastic. Feel good about that. Pat yourself on the back and realize you've got some more progress to make. And I guess I was really lucky and didn't realize it. I spent 3 years in jazz choirs when I was in high school, and that is all about learning to sing a harmony and holding a harmony. And that made me, without thinking of that at the time, but now I've done a lot of modern opera. Oh my gosh, it's so difficult. And if you have to learn it, and like you were saying in the live stream, be really bullish about it. You just have to be so stubborn and know that's what you're singing, because there's no help anywhere. There's no help. You have to count like insane,
Yeah.
and you have to sing those intervals. You have to train it, and it is death by a thousand cuts, even for advanced musicians. I know world famous musicians, singers, they spend a year sometimes preparing this repertoire because it's so difficult. So that's not where you want to start. You want to start with where you're at. Your habit is 75% success ratio. Fantastic. You're just going to have to continue working on it, and the more you do it, guess it's just going to get better and better and better. What would you like to add?
Well, one uh, there's not going to be 100% answer to this, because it's going to be your path, but it's going to be through sitting by yourself without distractions and repetition for sure. But you're talking about singing with people a cappella. What do you do when you're singing with someone else and they start to drift on pitch. Do you go with them or do you hold fast? Well, there's a quandary, especially when there's an audience watching. Good luck finding that one, because there's only an answer in the moment. You know, but if it's a cappella, what if the bass player goes flat and it's a cappella? Well, I guess you'd better go flat, because he's deciding the worldview. Wherever he stands is where the chord is, right? But then what if you're singing with a band and the lead singer is singing sharp? Do I go try to split the difference, go a tiny bit sharp, so I'm with him and with the band, be the glue? Like there's a there's a lot of variables to take into play that you don't know until they happen, because you don't plan for mistakes. You just have to go through mistakes, so next time they happen, you know how to react, you know, because you can't see which ones are going to happen. As far as learning a harmony, again, like if you're 75%, well, maybe that note, I've had people where that note, you know, you went to an accent, not an altered chord, but a substitution chord, instead of, sorry, it should be an F sharp minor diatonically, but they go. So I've had singers who, this is just an example of, in a context, they would have trouble with, and you're like, no, it's well, that singer, they can take the whole rehearsal and make the whole band wait, or they can sit by themselves with a piano or a guitar, and they sing da da. Well, can you hear that? Then I'm not singing the right note. I'm singing There's a mind trick for you. Sing accurately in tune. I sing down a half step while my piano comes up, and I'm singing the minor second. That's fun. It's hard. It's crazy. It's weird. I have no use for it, but it takes that type of control where I'm being bullheaded, singing my interval in tune, no matter what cacophony is going on around me. So you just need to sit, learn your line, learn your part, treat it like a classical piano. You know, how do you do that? One hand. It's just like learning anything. You just got to be bullheaded and patient.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Just take your time. Demand from yourself to be as accurate as you can, and work slow. The great thing about that is, once you do take the time, let's just say it's one part of a song, like this interval you just demonstrated. Well, guess what's going to happen if you learned it correctly in this song? Next time it appears in music down the road, it's already there.
Yeah,
there's a lot of value in taking the time to get it right once. For our next question, any suggestions on a note that is dissonant to the chord in a song?
We just covered that. Yeah, you just have to be a bulldog and clear in your heart and soul.
Yeah.
Your feet. Plant. Make sure your cinder blocks are laid with square. You ever see a wall that's built with one little stone out of place? 5 stones later, the whole wall's cattywampus. You have to take them all back off, remove the little pebble, put them all back. You have to have sure footing, and you have to it's a lot of experience and bullheadedness, you know?
Yeah, I just have to comment, because musicians are much better at being bullheaded, and then but what happens sometimes is the musician is so bullheaded, if there's a misprint on the sheet, they'll just play it. They'll just play it. It sounds god awful. It sounds horrible, and the rest of the band's like, and the singer's like, and the musical director's like, what's going on? But they just play it. It's like, well, this is what I got on my sheet.
Yeah, and interesting thing, like, about being so yeah, you have to be bullheaded, but you also have to be flexible, because this is a little bit off of this question, but to answer the question, if there was a dissonant note, you have to be clear about what it is. It can't be mushy in your head. It has to be clear. Any note is just a note. Dissonant is context. We said earlier, Major seventh. Sounds dissonant until pretty. How about minor ninth, which is octave and a half step up, so it's the same as this. Jaws open up, but up an octave. That sounds dissonant, doesn't it? What if I go? It's not dissonant anymore. It's all about context. So whatever note you're singing, whether it's a melody or a harmony, it has to be its own melody that you are crystal clear about. And dissonance is a matter of context. You know, everyone should go get. Have you ever heard this? The Bulgarian Women's Choir. Do you know that one?
No.
Oh, write it down. Check it out. I don't know how much of it is on Spotify or YouTube. I had the CD back in the 1800s. I had the CD. They did a U.S. tour where it's a live concert tour. The Bulgarian Women's Choir. It is remarkable. All odd time signatures, all this dissonance, all a cappella.
Cool.
It is inspiring. It's one of my favorite records. So there's that. Now here's about it. What about the musicians being reactive? How many times has anyone played a gig out there where you're playing and the melody is and the singer comes in and you're like well, they're up a half step. So how quickly could the band adjust? Or there's a modulation that comes and the singer modulates to the wrong pace.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you might give it a second, and you have a second because you don't know if the singer's going to come back to you. But then you go a bar and a half, the singer doesn't. The whole band, minor third, and you got to go for it. So, regardless of instruments, all this stuff is you got to be listen. You when I say bulldogged, you still have to be. You have to be like it's like. I wish I had all the life experience of all the pretend analogies I make. But like, what about a martial artist who is so strong and powerful, but just like a weeping? You want to be the tree that's the willow, where you're going to outweigh the storm because you're so strong. And my analogies are all mixed up, and I don't care. But that's how you got to be.
No, it's true. I think put it that context when you're practicing. Be bulldogged about it and learn to love the dissonance, and so that you know that note's coming and you're like
yeah
that and be bold
yeah
into it, you know, then you gotta be flexible and make music. Let's jump to our next question. Any tips for recognizing and playing chords by ear?
Yep, everything we just said.
Everything we just said. Yeah, I guess the message is really you got to put in the time, and people don't want to put in the time, and that's where I think the main reason people don't progress the way they'd like to. And please understand, it's not about it. It can't. Some things might be a little bit torturous, but I have some very simple warm-up exercises I do with clients and I do with myself. They work. They are so annoyingly simple, but if you really concentrate in this simplicity, 3 minutes, you are done. But you have to really focus for 3 minutes and just tell yourself, okay, I'm not going to do this for the next 50 minutes. I'm going to do this concentrated for the next 5 to 10 minutes and move on. That pays off huge dividends over time.
Yeah. With the chords, I mentioned this briefly, and trust me, I wish this would have been a 5-hour session, right? But that's what study is. You know, there's more. So when it comes to chords, what's the question? Recognizing or singing or identifying? It's all the same, frankly. You know, so you want to learn your intervals first. I mean, obviously, not the only thing. You could go up, play your gigs, play your this. In addition to everything you're doing, learn your intervals. Learn what they are. So if I say major third, obviously it's a major third. Well, obviously it's a minor third. Well, like I said earlier, what is a dominant seventh chord? I don't hope they're coming out through the speaker. Okay, well, major third, minor third, minor third. There you are. It's a dominant seventh chord. So I don't always. I mean, this is just part of my worldview. It's part of what informs our worldview. It's part of your radar. A dolphin doesn't think, I'm going to turn on my radar now. I'm going to go, I'm hungry. They think, I'm hungry. There's the fish. It's second nature because it's part of their system. So, and I'm not saying I'm as good as any as I want to be at any of this. Of course, I need to be way better at all of this, as do we all. But so if I know that a minor seventh chord, here's a trick. If you know what they are, and this takes part of learning. So I don't know who asked the question. I don't know what their background is or how much they've already. Maybe they have a degree in college. Maybe they've only played by ear. Neither of which is better than the other. Truly. But what you're asking sort of says that you should maybe take the steps of learning what the dialogue of some of these other things are. So if I can say to you, sing up a minor third, a major third, and a minor third, and a whole step. Well, look, I'm in tune. I got to the octave, and I outlined a minor seventh chord because I know what components are. It's I don't want to make it more analytical than it needs to be, but that we're looking at things. Music theory is all done in the rearview mirror. You don't write a song by theory. You don't have a melody come to you on the most beautiful day of your life by theory. You don't do anything by theory unless you want to be a math rocker, right? Or even an uninspired math rocker, I should say, because even that, like I'll write all the time your songs because they come to me. But theory is about communicating what's in your head to other people and about listening to what someone else did and explaining it to yourself or other people to make it quicker. That's all it is. It's a tool. Okay. So if I happen to have the tool of, look at that. I remembered it from about 90 seconds ago. Not that this is a major feat, but I was still in tune because my templates and radar are just a little bit set up. So understanding what makes each chord, understanding what the relationships within them are, and just sitting, hanging out and singing them, and playing them and identifying them.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love what you mentioned about theory being, in the rearview mirror. I think that's really what I'd like to say about vocal technique as well. And vocal science, it's very important, fascinating, but it's really analyzing something that's already happened or is already happening, right? To understand why and how it's happening, to hopefully help you make that happen again easier. But
yeah,
that's really what it is, and for you to become more consistent as a musician and as a singer. The next question is there a point where you encounter a student who is simply not musical enough to get this or detect that they are not singing in tune?
Well, this could be a question for anybody at all. And of course, the answer is if you've taught more than, say, 100 people at some point, yes, of course, you've met people who are very beginning and making these associations, but that is not to be confused with tone deaf or anything that's debilitating. It has to do with the fact that they didn't make these associations yet. That's all. It doesn't matter. I had a client who is awesome, dude, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with aptitude. It's all just it's Darwin. It's nature versus nurture. This is nurture, not nature. He is in his, I guess, 50s. He's a psychologist. He used to be an electrical engineer. He's got schooling credentials out the wazoo. But when he started to sing, and he loved singing, it was stage fright, meaning even in front of a person like me in the room, like sweat profusely, just the conversation of singing. It's just a reaction, right? And when he would sing his big, beautiful, low voice, and he'd be like, okay, what do we do now? And this is, we should have I would love, by the way, may I submit something? This is maybe a class for teachers, but what do you do with people who can barely register pitch yet? But we worked weekly for months and months and months. And you just all you need for this is love of music and patience and clear intention. That's all you need. And hopefully someone to work with you to point out, hear how the note disappears. There's you speak as much as I do, but there's no easy. There's no way out but through. Patience and love. That's all you need.
I think what's important about what you just said is that people used to just tell singers, "You're tone deaf. Forget about it."
Yeah.
Right? And so if you have this issue, like what you said, it's just there's a coordination that you didn't develop at some point. You have to develop it. And it can be tedious. It's going to take time, but the positive side of that is you can accomplish it, and it's not going to take you as long and be as impossible as you may think, but you have to put in consistent effort. It just takes patience, moving slow, a sure step, not too many steps, right?
Yeah, I I uh I was just writing this to somebody yesterday. Um, I am not a visual artist. Okay, so I couldn't just tell you this is fuchsia, that's magenta, because it's a subtle distinction. One of them, I believe, is it's magenta has more brown and red. One of them has a little bit more brown and red than the other. Exactly, right? But to a visual artist, they're like, "What do you mean? How dare you put magenta on this palette?" You know what I mean?
Gentle,
It's so
yeah.
exactly. And even like my wife thinks I'm colorblind, but sometimes because she's like, "That's green." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's blue. It's some shade of aqua." Where does it transition to one or the other? Well, maybe I just like blue better, and maybe I'm seeing out of tune, but I clearly haven't spent the focus on shades between the color spectrum, and that's all this is.
Yeah, I totally agree. 99.9% of the time, it can be learned. It's really next to, that's just my belief and my experience. Let's move on to the next question. Is learning intervals helpful with riffs and runs? From Nancy.
Well, let's play eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and you guess which my answer is going to be.
Yes, I'm gonna guess yes, because what if I would just answer that? Of course, it's going to be extremely helpful, because what are runs? Runs are intervals in a rhythmical pattern.
Yeah, and that's where we're talking about intervals or such a. It's not even intervals. Like I don't even almost don't even think they qualify in the music theory, because to have music theory you have to have music, and music intervals aren't. They're not a construct. They're just noticing is how far is it when I toss a ball to your catcher's mitt? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's 6 feet or it's 10 feet, and you know how accurate are judging that? It's I mean I know it is music theory because we're analyzing something that's existing in music, but yes, intervals are a force. They're a base force of nature. That's kind of like saying, and I don't mean to mean the question. I mean to exalt the question about how primal this is. Would understanding DNA have any implication on making this new vaccine? Probably,
probably. Yeah.
because it's the structure. You know what I mean? So if I and also by the way, a lot of voice teachers, right? Okay, but I make sure that anyone who's like a contemporary singer, I do guitar exercises. So we all depend on songs. Right? Do a lot of singers go or in thirds, we all know this. But doing it in a pentatonic, guitar players don't even do that much. Or we all know this. But what about? Okay, well, in a pentatonic. I'm not really paying attention, but you see what I'm saying? You learn some of these things based on intervals in your riffs. Any eight, I'm just going to make this complete BS number up. 80% of the time when I deconstruct someone's R&B riff, there is some element of a basic pentatonic exercise or scale exercise in there. So all of this stuff, if I'm singing hey, 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 and I'm not that kind of singer. I'm totally pretending, right? But I'm hearing hey, hey, and then oh, luckily I did my exercises and I learned some basic stuff. So yes, absolutely, intervals
Yeah.
aren't in any riff. Interval is anytime you have more than one note present, anytime, whether the played as a chord or in succession or in a bunch of successions. Okay, it's all a matter of what happened and just identifying the distance of how, so that way it makes it a little more clear to me.
I think to training your intervals also increases. It's like increasing your vocabulary, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
more familiar you are with different intervals, that you just have a bigger vocabulary to choose from now for your riffs and your runs. And most people that are doing riffs and runs all the time, they've got about 4 to 6 that they just repeat again and again and again and again and again. And some are adding, but they've just got their standard riff run sequence. So if you
Yeah.
consider your riffs and runs as your riff run vocabulary, once you master one interval set, then you do another, and now you're just adding to your riff run vocabulary. It will come easier and easier. We got one more question, then we'll wrap it up. So this question is, when identifying chords, in most cases, I hear the melody line made by the bass. What method can you recommend to train the ear and identify the chords of a song effectively?
Yep, I saw that one in the chat. Was it Jennifer? I don't remember who asked that one. I saw that one, I believe. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. But yeah, it's exactly everything we said. First, you want to go. I mean, it was just like 1 6 2 5. Okay, well, down a minor third, up a fourth, down a fifth, up a fourth, back to home base. So in C it's C A D G, in E it's E C sharp F sharp B, whatever it is. So do 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 do, and then so you just have to take a mental snapshot, freeze frame, and then use this in your head as you freeze frame. Well, it's going too fast. Okay, well, stop. Up a fifth. Okay, I've got a major chord there. First of all, I can just hear it's happy. Some of it's not rocket science. It's happy. It's a major chord. Up a minor third, a major third. Oh, it's a minor chord. Root third, fifth, down an octave. I mean, none of this comes on day one necessarily. So I've got C, A minor, D minor, G7, C. It's all hand in hand, but it's not all on day one.
Yeah.
So
I think, it's just reminding me again and again, and what I want to say is, we all want to make things more complicated than they are. This isn't really complicated. You just got to do little steps, add up quickly, and then you'll talk about it and somebody will be like, oh, I could never do that. And you're
yeah,
like, no, this is super simple.
yeah,
It's the same thing with singing. I mean, singing, people come, the main issue people have is they come in and they've made it complicated when
yeah,
it's a very basic system. Of course, learning how the system works helps you do it better. And so we have to practice and acquire that knowledge. But keep it simple. The more simple you can get it, work slow, you'll progress fast. Sure steps, not more steps.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Korel. It's been
Yeah,
a
thank you.
pleasure, and I'll look forward to collaborating again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this. It was really, really, really enjoyable for me too. Appreciate it.
Maybe you could share what was your favorite part about the Voice Masters live stream today, and why would you recommend people tune in?
Well, I mean, I love any group where I love when I didn't realize until sort of this new internet age came about, where even in our voice teacher groups, and in this voice, I love where it's a non-hierarchical, non-judgmental group of people coming together to learn. Like, I only happen to be co-hosting teaching this live stream because you asked me. I was next on the line of fire. I'm up here doing it, right? But I watched last week's with Dita and I was the student, right? So like, we are all in this together. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, fantastic. I agree, and that's what I think. If we can all maintain that mindset, just being open-minded to learn from each other, not having the expectation that we need to be the expert in everything, then we'll continue growing, and it's much more enjoyable.
Yep.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks a bunch.